A modest woman mocked in open court would soon leave everyone stunned, as their new judge. Katherine Sullivan stood tall amid the ridicule, unshaken. Judge Montgomery chuckled along with the rest of the courtroom, amused by her simple gray sweatshirt and straightforward tone. No one suspected the woman in casual clothes would soon be the one wearing the robes of authority. That morning, Katherine had chosen her outfit deliberately, a plain gray sweatshirt layered over a black t-shirt, faded jeans, and worn-in sneakers. At 45, she had spent over 20 years climbing the ranks of the legal system, from public defender to respected district judge. But today wasn't about formality. Today was undercover work. She tucked a loose strand of brown hair behind her ear, gazing into the mirror. The reflection looking back bore little resemblance to the professional headshot attached to her recent judicial appointment. That was the idea. 1 week, she murmured, smoothing her sweatshirt. In 1 week, she'd officially replace the retiring Judge Montgomery at the county courthouse, an institution with the highest number of complaints regarding condescension and mistreatment of ordinary citizens, a courthouse where those lacking pricey legal representation often faced harsher outcomes. Katherine had built her reputation on fairness and integrity. When the Chief Justice had offered her this seat, she agreed, but on one condition: she needed to see it all firsthand. "You want to do what?" Chief Justice Abrams had asked, raising his brows in disbelief. "I need to see how the courtroom runs when no one knows they're being watched," Katherine explained. "No stagecraft, no special treatment. I want to see how everyday people are really treated." Abrams had reluctantly approved. "Your formal introduction is scheduled for next Monday. Until then, you're on your own." Now she glanced at her watch. The Richardson case was set for 10 a.m., a simple hearing that had ballooned into 3 years of endless delays. The files showed a clear trend. Every time the court-appointed attorney requested more time, hearings were pushed. But the defense, backed by the prestigious firm Carson and Mitchell, had received swift accommodations. She slid her credentials and appointment letter into her old leather bag, just in case. Not that she planned to use them today. Today was about observation. Katherine, parked in the public lot, purposefully avoiding the reserved judicial spaces. As she entered the courthouse with a sea of citizens, family members, witnesses, defendants, no one gave her a second glance. She passed through security and followed the signs to Courtroom 3. The towering wooden doors radiated authority, almost by design. Katherine had seen it too many times, how the architecture of justice could intimidate those it was meant to protect. She slipped into the gallery's back row unnoticed. Lawyers in pristine suits, clerks rustling papers in the court. Reporters setting up for the day filled the room. At the front sat the Richardson family, mother, father, and their daughter Emma. Their college savings had reportedly vanished at the hands of a negligent financial advisor. Katherine quietly observed. The bailiff chatted warmly with the defense attorney but barely acknowledged the Richardsons. When Emma approached the clerk, timidly asking where their attorney was, the response was dismissive. "He'll get here when he gets here. Take your seat." Then the doors at the side opened. Judge Montgomery entered in his black robes, commanding the room with his tall frame, silver hair, and decades of courtroom presence. "All rise," the bailiff called. Katherine stood with the others, mentally bracing herself. Today she wasn't Judge Sullivan. She was just a bystander in a system that too often lost sight of its purpose. The formalities began. Montgomery called the Richardson case with a tone of practiced disinterest. His glasses perched low on his nose, he addressed the defense attorney by name, while referring to the plaintiffs merely as the other party. The Richardsons' court-appointed lawyer, Mr. Davis, rushed in 10 minutes late, out of breath. "Mr. Davis," Montgomery said with dry disdain. "Once again you show your disregard for this court's schedule." The courtroom staff laughed quietly. Katherine saw Emma sink in her seat, her parents exchanging anxious glances. Their financial future was being decided, yet their presence seemed more an inconvenience than a concern. 20 minutes in, Katherine's frustration boiled over. The defense attorney had just been granted a third extension for document discovery. Meanwhile, Mr. Davis's identical request had been summarily denied. Without planning to, she stood. "Excuse me," she said, her voice even but firm. The courtroom froze. All eyes turned to the woman in the gray sweatshirt who had interrupted proceedings. Montgomery looked up, clearly irritated. "Ma'am, this isn't a town hall. Sit down or leave my courtroom." But Katherine didn't flinch. "Apologies, Your Honor," she said. "But I noticed an inconsistency in how procedural requests are being granted. If one side receives more time, shouldn't the other be granted the same opportunity?" The defense attorney glared at her. Murmurs spread through the gallery. The Richardsons looked stunned and just a little hopeful. Montgomery's face darkened. "And you are?" "A concerned observer," Katherine said calmly. "Well, concerned observer." His voice oozed sarcasm. "Perhaps once you've passed the bar and practiced for 30 years, your opinion might matter. Until then, sit down or I will have you removed." Laughter rippled again. The bailiff moved toward her, but Katherine stayed composed. This wasn't about pride. It was about seeing the system in action, especially when challenged by someone it perceived as powerless. "I understand," she said, taking her seat. "Thank you for the clarification, Your Honor." But Montgomery wasn't finished. He leaned forward, peering down at her. "Actually," he said, removing his glasses, "since our guest is so invested, maybe she'd like to enlighten us further." Katherine rose once more and approached the bench. The room fell silent. The court reporter hovered, ready. The Richardsons stared as she stepped forward. "Your name for the record?" Montgomery demanded. "Katherine Sullivan. And what's your interest in this case, Ms. Sullivan? Are you related to the plaintiffs? A friend?" "I'm an observer with an interest in judicial procedure," she replied. "An observer?" he repeated with mock incredulity. "And where did you study law, Ms. Sullivan?" She could have said, "Yale Law, class of 2003. Honors." But she didn't. "I've studied the law, Your Honor," she said simply. Montgomery laughed. "You've studied the law," he repeated, making air quotes. "Well, isn't that something?" The defense attorney smirked. Even the Richardsons' own lawyer looked embarrassed on her behalf. Montgomery leaned back, clearly amused. "Based on your study, you believe you're qualified to interrupt this courtroom?" "I was only pointing out what seemed like inconsistent procedure," Katherine replied, calm and steady. "What appears inconsistent to an untrained eye," Montgomery snapped, "usually has a legal foundation, something you'd understand if you had any actual credentials." He gestured to the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we're honored with the presence of a legal scholar." More laughter, but not everyone found it funny. Katherine caught glimpses of discomfort on a few faces. Montgomery pressed on. "Tell me, Miss Sullivan, in your expert opinion, how should I rule?" A trap. If she answered, she'd overstep. If she refused, he'd claim she was out of line. "I wouldn't presume to tell you how to rule, Your Honor," she said. "Only that equal treatment matters." "Advocating now, are we?" Montgomery scoffed. "You have no standing to advocate for anything here. This is not social media. It's a court of law. This institution demands training, experience, and decorum. A sweater and good intentions won't cut it." He dismissed her with a wave. "You may sit down. Interrupt again, and you'll be removed. Clear?" "Perfectly clear, Your Honor," she said, voice unwavering. As she turned to return to her seat, she locked eyes with Emma Richardson. The young woman's expression had dimmed. Katherine's public humiliation had only reinforced what Emma already feared. The system wasn't built for people like them. Still, Katherine wasn't deterred. She resumed her seat, her dignity unshaken. The courtroom moved on, but something had shifted. Curious glances followed her. The air buzzed with quiet whispers. Montgomery ruled, as expected, in favor of the defense. He denied the Richardsons' motion outright. Katherine jotted down notes in a small notebook from her bag. Times, names, exact phrases. During a short recess, she noticed a clerk staring. Her nameplate read Martha Jenkins. There was recognition in her eyes. She tilted her head, as if trying to place Catherine's face. Katherine stayed expressionless, but she knew. Martha had likely seen her name in the judicial appointment newsletter. Meanwhile, the defense attorney leaned in close to Montgomery during the recess, engaging in a casual, friendly conversation. The kind shared between people who know the outcome was never really in doubt. Their shared laughter, exchanged glances toward the Richardsons, and casual camaraderie only confirmed what Katherine had already seen in the case files: preferential treatment and a troubling sense of entitlement. When court resumed, Judge Montgomery seemed unsettled. He glanced toward Katherine more often now, his earlier smugness noticeably dulled. Perhaps Martha Jenkins had whispered something to him. Or maybe it was the way Katherine had calmly endured his attempt to embarrass her. "Your Honor," the defense attorney said smoothly, "in light of today's developments, we'd like to propose a settlement conference rather than proceed with the hearing." Montgomery nodded, pleased. "A reasonable suggestion, Counselor. The court encourages resolution without unnecessary delays." Katherine observed quietly as the Richardsons consulted their court-appointed attorney, who appeared far too eager to accept any offer. Emma Richardson looked on the verge of tears until her gaze found Katherine again. Her presence, once confusing, now seemed to spark a flicker of hope. Montgomery addressed the gallery. "Let me remind all observers that settlement discussions are confidential. Any interference will result in removal and may be grounds for contempt." He locked eyes with Katherine. The warning was unmistakable. As the lawyers stepped into the conference room, Katherine slipped out of the courtroom and checked the time, just shy of noon. In the hallway, she spotted Chief Justice Abrams approaching, accompanied by a court administrator holding a leather portfolio. Katherine ducked into the women's restroom, needing a moment to think. Her covert mission had confirmed everything she'd feared: favoritism, intimidation, a culture of indifference. And now it was time to decide what to do next. The door swung open behind her. Martha Jenkins stood in the doorway, a look of uncertainty on her face giving way to recognition. "It is you?" Martha said slowly. "I saw your appointment in the newsletter but didn't realize. Why are you dressed like that? Why did Judge Montgomery—" Katherine turned to her, raising a finger to her lips. "It's complicated," she said quietly, "and about to get more so." She applied lipstick with composed precision, watching Martha in the mirror. "This wasn't exactly how I imagined today would go," she admitted. Martha looked toward the door, concerned. "Judge Montgomery humiliated you in front of everyone. If he knew, but he doesn't," Katherine replied, turning to face her. "Not yet. And I'd appreciate your discretion. Just for a little while longer." Martha hesitated. "The Chief Justice is here. They're gathering in courtroom 3 for some kind of announcement." Realization flickered in her eyes. "It's about you, isn't it? Your official introduction?" Katherine nodded. "Moved up from next week. Apparently the chief had concerns about my unconventional approach." "I should go," Martha said, suddenly flustered. "They'll notice I'm missing." "Of course," Katherine said gently. "But would you give me a moment? I'd rather enter once everyone's gathered." After Martha left, Katherine drew a steady breath and adjusted her sweatshirt one last time. This wasn't how she'd pictured her debut, but maybe, just maybe, it was better this way. She had seen for herself what needed changing. Back in courtroom 3, confusion stirred. The Richardsons had returned from the settlement meeting, looking dejected. The defense attorneys, by contrast, seemed quietly triumphant. Judge Montgomery was in conversation with Chief Justice Abrams, his face growing increasingly uneasy. "What do you mean, introduce her today?" he whispered harshly. "I haven't even met her." The Chief Justice, composed and commanding, replied evenly. "She's been quite committed to observing your courtroom firsthand, Richard. I believe you've already made a strong impression." Montgomery's complexion paled. "What are you saying, Eleanor?" Before she could answer, the doors opened. Katherine Sullivan walked in, still wearing her gray sweatshirt and jeans, but now carrying herself with unmistakable confidence. Silence fell across the room. Montgomery froze, the color draining from his face as realization struck. "No," he whispered. Katherine approached the bench and gave a respectful nod to Chief Justice Abrams, then turned to address the courtroom. "For those who don't know me," she began, her voice calm and firm, "I'm Katherine Sullivan. As of next Monday, I'll be presiding over this court following Judge Montgomery's retirement." Gasps and whispers spread through the gallery. The defense attorney's smugness vanished. The Richardsons looked stunned, then hopeful. "Want to thank Judge Montgomery," Katherine continued, meeting his eyes directly, "for his enlightening demonstration of courtroom operations today. It has been deeply informative." Montgomery was speechless. Chief Justice Abrams stepped forward. Judge Sullivan requested an opportunity to observe this court prior to her formal start. Though her methods were, she paused, glancing at Katherine with mild exasperation, unorthodox. Her dedication is admirable. The court administrator opened the leather portfolio, removing official state documents bearing the Supreme Court seal. "I had intended for a formal ceremony next week," Abrams continued. "But given the circumstances, Richard Montgomery, after 30 years of service, we acknowledge your retirement, effective this Friday." Turning to Katherine, she added, "The governor has confirmed your appointment effective Monday morning." Katherine accepted the documents solemnly. "I look forward to serving this community with fairness and respect." She scanned the room, her gaze landing on the Richardsons. Every person who enters this courtroom deserves to be heard with dignity, regardless of income, appearance, or legal representation. Emma Richardson smiled for the first time that day. The room remained, hushed, stunned. Montgomery stood rigid beside the bench, visibly diminished. Staff members avoided eye contact, some whispered. Martha Jenkins was already removing the nameplate from the judge's bench. "In light of today's circumstances," Abrams said, breaking the silence, "I recommend we adjourn proceedings. Until next week," Montgomery finally spoke. "With all due respect, I'm still presiding judge until Friday. There's no reason to disrupt the calendar." Katherine stepped forward, addressing the Richardsons directly. "Would your family be willing to accept a short postponement, with assurance that your case will receive full, impartial review next week?" Mr. Richardson looked from Montgomery to Katherine, then at his daughter. "Yes, Your Honor. We would." The defense attorney objected. "Your Honor, Chief Justice, this is highly irregular. We were close to a settlement. A settlement negotiated under imbalance and pressure is not justice." Katherine interjected calmly. Montgomery's face reddened. "I have never run an unfair courtroom in my 30 years on this bench." The room tensed. Chief Justice Abrams raised a hand. "This is neither the time nor the place for debate. Court is adjourned until Monday morning, when Judge Sullivan will take the bench." As people gathered their belongings, Katherine approached. "The Richardsons. I want you to know," she said gently, "your concerns will be heard. Your time and case will be given the full weight they deserve." Emma blinked back tears. "Thank you. We've been trying to be heard for so long." Katherine nodded. "That will change." Across the courtroom, Martha removed Montgomery's nameplate. Other staff turned away as Montgomery retreated to his chambers, his farewell reception now painfully awkward. The defense attorney approached Katherine, his tone newly respectful. "Judge Sullivan, I hope you understand. I was simply advocating for my client's interests." Katherine met his eyes. "I expect nothing less, Counselor, so long as it's done within the bounds of equity and professional courtesy for all parties." He nodded, subdued. "Of course, Your Honor." As the courtroom emptied, Chief Justice Abrams touched Katherine's arm. "This isn't quite how I imagined your observational period unfolding." Katherine offered a faint smile. "Nor I. But it was necessary." Abrams gave her a long look. "You've made an entrance. Montgomery won't forget this or forgive it." "This wasn't about him," Katherine replied. "It was about the truth, and the people this court serves." Abrams nodded slowly. "Well, Judge Sullivan, it seems you have your work cut out for you." Katherine looked around her soon-to-be courtroom. "Yes," she said. "I certainly do." Monday morning arrived clear and bright. Katherine Sullivan stood before the mirror, straightening the collar of her black robe. The symbolic weight of justice sat firmly but comfortably on her shoulders. Over the weekend, news of the courtroom surprise had spread. Legal blogs buzzed with debate over her unconventional debut. Some criticized her tactics, but many praised her commitment to transparency and reform. As she stepped into the courthouse, the difference was palpable. Gone was the anonymity of Friday. Court officers greeted her with nods. Attorneys paused their conversations to acknowledge her. Even the security guard stood a little straighter. At the entrance to Courtroom 3, she paused. Her name now graced the judge's entrance. Inside, the gallery was full. The Richardson family sat front and center, hopeful. The defense attorney looked more restrained than he had days before. Martha Jenkins approached, handing her a thick folder. "Your first day's docket, Judge Sullivan, and these came for you." She gestured toward the bench, where a modest bouquet of flowers waited with a card from the courthouse staff. "Thank you, Martha." At precisely 9 a.m., the bailiff called. "All rise." Katherine Sullivan stepped up to the bench. The courtroom stood in silent anticipation. She took her seat, surveyed the room, and spoke. "Please be seated. Before we begin, I want to make something clear." She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "In this courtroom, everyone will be heard. Everyone will be treated with dignity, because justice demands nothing less." She opened the first file, Richardson v. Carson Financial Advisors. "Are both parties ready?" And so, a new chapter of justice began. If this story moved you today, remember, true dignity isn't found in titles or robes. It's in how we treat those with less power than ourselves. Have you ever seen someone judged unfairly based on appearance or status? Share your thoughts below. And if you believe in stories that challenge the status quo, subscribe to support more tales that remind us what justice really means. And tell us, where are you watching from?